Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for The Little Things. And what The Little Things is essentially about is we center on two detectives. One of them is this very old deputy sheriff who, he has gone through a lot of cases before. The other is this new detective that is fresh out of college, and the two of them have to team up to solve this murder and hopefully get to the bottom of things, and things start to take a turn when they come across this drifter that they feel might be the prime suspect within this case. So, The Little Things overall, I was actually kind of excited for this movie. I mean, yes, it is a crime thriller coming out in January. That's not the greatest sign, usually, but considering that this is a weird January, and also considering that there are very few, wide releases out right now, very few things that are like this, the fact that this is able to come out is something that I was getting excited for. We had a really great caster, we had a compelling mystery, and it just seemed like a kind of film that I think could be really good if handled well, and I was definitely looking forward to seeing this one. So I decided that, I was contemplating whether or not to see it in theaters or HBO Max. I ultimately decided to watch it on HBO Max, and I have seen it, and I will say this about The Little Things. Overall, this is a much better movie than what we normally get in January, but it's not quite on the level that I think it really could have hit. This is a okay to decent crime thriller at best, but really doesn't do much of anything to really stick out and, be something original, be something memorable in that way, and I think that's what really does hold it back. But again, there are a few things that do elevate, which we're going to start off with the cast, which, getting into the cast right here, that is easily, I think, the biggest selling point for this movie. I think everyone in this film, acting-wise, mostly does a really good job. Let's first talk about Denzel Washington. He's one of the best actors working today. He's charismatic in basically every single, he puts so much effort into every role that he's in. Any film that he's in, even if it's bad, you can guarantee you're going to get a good performance out of him, and that's very much the case within this film. He does a really good job of playing this character that you can tell is very experienced, but also is kind of dealing with his own inner demons, and I thought Washington played that character very well. He's very methodical, he's very patient with the way he goes about things, and I just really like the way he played this character. He just was very compelling in the role, and I think overall he is one of the things that really does elevate this movie for sure. And same with Rami Malek. I know a lot of people are coming hard on him, saying that, oh, he's not right for the role. I actually really liked his more sort of, I would say, I liked his more straightforward and, straight demeanor. I like that overall. I like that he's someone that is very by the book. He's someone that you can tell he's very straightforward with the way that he goes about things. And I thought overall he did as good of a job as he could in this film. I definitely really did enjoy his performance overall. I'm glad to see that Rami Malek is continuing to get work because I think he's such a talented actor in that way. And I thought the dynamic between these two, they worked very well together. Washington's more experienced demeanor paired with Malek's more, rustier, but also, like I said, more straightforward demeanor, whereas Washington, you can see, is far more, knowledgeable in things. I thought they worked very well together there, and I definitely did enjoy their performances throughout this film. In terms of the rest of the cast, I think everyone does as good of a job as they could. I was very worried, understandably, going into this movie about Jared Leto, which, for some reason, is now a Golden Globe nominated performance, which is a real hoot, I must say. I have no idea how that actually happened, and that in itself is hilarious to me, but his performance is really not that bad here. I think the best way to describe it is that it is a bit inconsistent, though. There are some times where it really works. He's playing this drifter that is really weird and eccentric and doesn't really connect with people in the way that you really want him to. And then there are times where he's just being a little too, Jared Leto. He's hamming it up a lot, and it just is a little too much overacting. It's not a bad performance, though. It was better than I was expecting, and I do think more than often, it does actually work quite well, and I was pretty surprised by how much I enjoyed his performance, how much I actually was kind of digging his performance performance in this film overall. Michael Hyatt, I thought, also did a really great job. I think she gave a very underrated performance in this film. I've always been a fan of her, going all the way back to things like, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and things like that. I've been a fan of her for sure, and I thought she gave a very strong performance in this film. The rest of the cast, Terry Kinney, Natalie Morales, everyone really does a good job here, acting-wise. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because now we get to the things that I do think start to bring this film down a bit. And Hancock's directing, I don't think is bad. I don't think John Lee Hancock did a bad job directing this film. You can tell that he is taking this material very seriously. The problem is, it's just not a very fresh approach. It feels very recycled in that way, and that really leads me to my biggest issue with this film, is that more than often, this film feels less like it's trying to, you can tell that he's taken a lot of inspiration from people like, say, David Fincher, or other people who have done crime thrillers in the past, and he does, I think, a pretty good job of, really paying tribute to them in the way that he can, and trying to make this as riveting as it possibly can. The problem really is his script. It just really is not that strong here. There are some things that really do work within this film, especially when it's linked to Denzel Washington's character. The character of Deke is one that actually I found very compelling throughout. He is this retired sheriff, but he also is one that has a bit of a past. You can see that throughout the film, a lot of the people, in the police station, they're very disgruntled with him working on this case. They don't really want him involved with something like this, because there's clearly something that he went through 5 years ago that is sort of inextricably linked to the case that's going on right now, and that's something that you're very compelled by. You want to know more about. The movie does a really good job of diving headfirst into his past and really getting you to understand, what he's really going through in that given moment. And again, contrasting that with someone like Rami Malek, who you can see that he's very new, but he's someone that they've put a lot of trust into. He's someone that really they think could be the next great detective, and you can see that he's a bit more of a rookie in that way. There's some things that Deke is telling him that he just hasn't really thought about as a character, and I think that's when the movie is most interesting. It's just seeing their two different approaches to this case, where you can see that Jim Baxter, he is very sure, no, this is what's going on. There's no other possible explanation, whereas Deke always feels like there's a little bit more to it. He doesn't feel it's quite as straightforward as the way that Baxter does, and I really do like that idea overall. I think that works very well within this film. The problem is the movie as a whole feels less like its own thing and more like a greatest hits collection of other films that really did come before it. I talked about how this film is very inspired by David Fincher and especially films like Seven, but it feels a little too inspired by that, because in trying to be something different, because this isn't just a straightforward crime thriller. It's trying to be a lot more than that. It just doesn't feel like it leans as heavily into it as it really should, especially when it comes to the case itself. This is not a very compelling case. It honestly feels very simple. There's this killer that's on the loose. He's killing some girls, and they have to figure out who it really is. The film, they don't really take the time to dive more into who this is or who the girls that he killed were or anything really like that. And I think that also just really brings this down a lot. You're not as invested in the mystery. I found myself way more invested, like I said, in these characters and their struggles that they're going through. And while the film does try to dive into that, it keeps you at an arm's length throughout the entire movie, and I just don't think they did enough overall. I need them to lean a bit heavier into that, and they just never really did. And then in terms of Jared Leto's character, the role that he plays, he actually doesn't come into this movie until about an hour in, and once he comes in, I think things start to get a little less interesting, because it becomes a bit clearer as to where this story is really going to go. From the second he's introduced, they are very certain that he's the killer. He talks about how he is this, he's obsessed with crime. He's studied crime a lot and things like that. This is something that he really has taken the time to really, study up on and really kind of dive headfirst into. It starts to feel feel a bit repetitive because Rami Malek's character is very certain that, like, yeah, this guy is the killer, while Denzel Washington isn't as sure, and the film just doesn't really do a lot after that, and I think that's when things start to be brought down a bit, and I think the problem with his character is that it just doesn't really feel like, you know, there is really any other suspects besides him, so you're kind of just believing, like, yeah, he's the killer, and that makes you significantly less interested in what's really going on. The film just doesn't really do enough in terms of that story. And the best scene is easily the interrogation scene that you see in the trailer. It gives you good explanation as to who all these characters are. It's when the tension is really ramped up to the highest degree, but it also is clearly the peak of the movie. I mean, after this scene, things really start to go downhill a bit. You know, I was really enjoying the first, like, 2 acts of this movie, but after a certain point, like I said, things just start to feel very repetitive in that way, and I cared way more about Denzel Washington's past and what was really going on with him. You know, why is everyone so wary of him taking on this case? He clearly has some sort of history with Michael Hyatt's character as well. She is someone that has covered up a lot of what he's done, and I want to know more about their past. And the problem is that's not revealed until literally the last, like, 20 minutes of this movie, and it just isn't really enough time to get us to really get behind what ended up happening. You know, they needed to do more, and once it's revealed what ended up happening, it didn't feel like it was worth it. You know, it felt like that's it, that's all we were building up to, and I just needed them to do more there, and I think that ultimately just fell very flat in that way, and especially where things end up leaving off when it comes to the end of this movie. It just at no point feels satisfying because the film is clearly trying to be a lot more, and I do really appreciate that, but it never really feels earned. It never really feels like it gets there in that way. It never really feels like it does enough to really get you to understand why this ending is the one that should end off this movie. It's not a bad ending or anything like that. It's just not a very satisfying one because the film did not really take the time to build you up to this ending. It makes you think that the whole film is this mystery, but then it takes a turn and you realize, no, that's not what's really going on here. And while I appreciate the fact the film went in an unconventional direction, again, I just don't think it really earned the way things did really wrap up here, and I thought that was just very disappointing overall. I would have liked to see more of a comprehensive dive into these characters, and the film just never really takes the time to do that, and I think that does ultimately bring it down. So again, story-wise, there are some things that do work here, but as a screenplay, it definitely does leave a lot to be desired, I would say, overall. Cinematography-wise, I don't think this film is bad. I think the film is, you know, has some really good cinematography and things like that. Nothing that really sticks out overall, but I do think it is pretty well filmed. And the score by Thomas Newman, I was honestly kind of disappointed by. I was expecting more from him because he is a really strong composer, and his score here, it just isn't very memorable. It's one that has its moments, but as a score, it's just not a very memorable one overall, and I think he could have done a better job with it. And the editing, I think this film is definitely way too long. There are a lot of scenes that do drag on. There's a few too many characters that just don't really serve as much of an impact as they really should, and I think that really does bring the film down overall, so I think the film definitely could have been better paced. If this was like 108 minutes as opposed to 2 hours, I think it probably would have ended up a lot better than it really did. So like I said, The Little Things is not a terrible film overall. It does have some good ideas. It is trying to be a little bit more, but it just feels too much like a relic of the past than it really does as its own thing. It does have some very strong performances from its 3 leads, and again, it does have some good ideas in there, but it just doesn't do enough overall to really stick out. As it is, this is a very forgettable crime thriller, and especially once you get to that ending, it feels more like a waste of time than anything. You're gonna be sitting there waiting for something to happen, and then when it finally does, you just don't really feel like it was earned, and it makes the film feel more like a waste of time than really anything else. The Little Things very much disappointed me, and I am going to give it overall a C+. Other than that, guys, in my review of The Little Things, most guys saw this from a relative your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.